Thank you very much. Wonderful, thanks. So I'm going to turn over to you guys very soon. So for those who've already been, have been to meetups in the past, so we're going to have a Q&A discussion where you guys can ask as many questions as you want. But just to get started, actually I have a question which is, I'm going to step aside from the pure data subject matter discussion. This is fundamentally an entrepreneurial event. There's lots of people in the audience who are either starting companies or thinking of starting companies. So just interested in hearing quickly for each one of you what your entrepreneurial story is, meaning specifically how you came up with the idea of your company. Was it something that, a problem that you thought about for a long time, or was it something that you carefully thought about and ruled out options and sort of zeroed in on that one specific problem? So one question. Second question for Buzz Visual Revenue and Sailthru. One big problem that each startup seems to face is how to recruit their data scientists. I'm just interested in how you guys connected, whether that was through networking or just, ads or whatever. So whoever wants to start.
We can start on this end. So when we got acquired by Yahoo, it was quite obvious that I didn't have any ambition of becoming SVP of Flim Flam over time. So I knew from the very get-go that I'll go out and do the next venture. The interesting part was that one of the focus areas was the Yahoo newspaper consortium. So I had access to some fantastic data, so 1,500 something local newspapers, and all of their data was made available to me. And what I found was that, not really too much surprise when you think about it, was that about half of all the article views on any given day for any one of these properties were driven off the home page or the section front page. Not search, not social, not RSS, not any other channel, the home page. A channel which they haven't really applied any tech to. So that was kind of a eye-opener. And as I then kind of started to research that, I saw the huge success that Yahoo themselves had with applying science to yahoo.com and their homepage. So I invited 6 friends over to New York. We worked in my apartment for a week trying to kind of disprove this being a good idea. They couldn't, and here we are. So that's the short story. Hiring data scientists is just not cool here at all.
You have to go to the Netherlands all the way.
Yeah, so the story goes like this. So one of the guys which I invited to New York, Lev, which took his PhD in Budapest and was in my previous venture, had a student who went on to Cambridge who knew Jerome, who was, I think you were in Cambridge for a couple of months. Or
yeah, I've been a visiting researcher there for 4 months. Yeah.
And he then recommended Jerome. I got in contact with Jerome, and then I started the whole dating process of, you know what, you and your wife should move to New York. This is going to be really good. And we spent probably 2 months dancing, and here you are. Oh, that's how I remember it.
Yeah, it's a good memory.
Yes.
I just remember all the forms filling in and applying for no, but now it's all cool. So really happy to be here.
Good.
So as Matt alluded to, I was a CTO for a lot of different companies. I was normally brought in when a site was not scaling very well, and they would call me in to rebuild from the inside out, keep things afloat, and build a team around it. And I did that for numerous different companies, some of which I'm proud of, some of which not so much. But it was it was always redevelopments and I always really wanted to outsource the email delivery and monitoring and inbox side of things, but also I wanted to be able to control that very specifically and be able to personalize that experience for all of them. So I tried outsourcing to a lot of different companies, and really it didn't work, and they couldn't do what I wanted them to do, and I ended up building that solution for what I needed, and that's evolved into a much bigger sort of product now, but that was essentially the first inception of it. And as for hiring data scientists, Daniel and I met through a mutual friend. Through Chris Wiggins, and then events like this, hopefully. It's not easy. They're hard to find.
So I kind of feel like, in some ways, I backed into this idea because when I came to America, it was about 12 years ago, I actually founded my first company. It was a gaming company. I knew nothing about infrastructure or data. I'm actually a designer by trade. Back in 2000, we had this crazy idea for building a distributed gaming platform that had like in-game micropayments and virtual goods. Unfortunately, we were just a little bit too early. And I ended up working at my buddy's company, Greenplum, which my friend Scott Yarrow is the founder there. And so I just kind of like had this career sideways move and ended up in this data space. And, I've been loving it because actually the application of what you do with data is some of the most interesting things that you can possibly do, right? As you really start to understand how people apply data. And so, after Greenplum, moved up to the Bay Area, I was living in Manhattan Beach and was like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm moving to the San Mateo, like surfing every day. So I stayed there and ended up taking this job at Teradata. And that was, I thought I was just going to do that for a year. And I was there for 5 years and did a whole bunch of stuff there. And at the end, as I mentioned when I was talking, I ended up running the strategic long-range planning group and really looking like, where are we going in 10 years? Where's this industry going in 10 years? And so I had a few ideas of, where I thought it was going to go. At Teradata, we did the Asta data purchase and a few other things that really kind of like led into this overarching strategy. And then Yahoo came calling and said, look, we have this awesome job, and that dance was 6 months, not 2 months, and I finally went there to really, because it was the hub of big data. I knew that big data was kind of like, this next sea change, and there was a bunch of my colleagues at Teradata who at the time didn't get it and just thought, oh, it's just unfangled, unstructured text. So I was like, right, I'm going to go to the font of big data, to where Hadoop has been created, and it just kind of like snowballed from there, I've always had this idea for about the last 2 or 3 years and just been kind of like refining and developing it. And so when I was at Battery, when they asked me to go and do an EIR gig there, it was a great job. I'll tell any entrepreneurs in the audience, the best way to launch a company is not to do it on your kitchen table or in your front room with 7 guys that you fly over from Europe. It's to have a VC pay you to go and launch a company because they help you, right? And one of the lessons I learned is that it's always better to make mistakes and learn things on other people's money, right? And then you get it right, and so that's kind of like how Continuuity came about. I had agreed to go and do 6 months with Battery. And first 3 months was just pretending to be a VC and looking at investments and talking to companies and going out there and talking to everybody. And then I was like, all right, I need to get focused on this. And then so the launch of Continuuity was kind of like 3 months from kind of like start to finish. Of I have an idea, okay, let's put some meat on the bone, raise some money, okay, we're going. It was a long gestation for that one.
Sounds easy though, right? We'll just raise some money.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, hiring data scientists, not one of my problems. hiring developers who know how to build massive scale distributed infrastructures, definitely a problem.
How do you do that?
With beer and dancing and right. Look, data scientist thing is really interesting. I actually think it's kind of like a new term, but an accident of kind of history, almost like where the market is at the minute. The data scientist is kind of like hybrid role of maybe a business analyst who knows how to program and is interested in data, or a programmer who knows something about data and can program. And I actually think that as an industry we need to solve that and get back to the point where all of those business analysts who can't program can still actually get real value out of the data without having to learn R or Python or Java or something like that.
Cool, great. So let me turn over to you guys. So we have 2 great volunteers here, Trevor and Gerald, with mics. Thank you so much, guys, for doing this. So when you ask a question, please mention quickly your name and your company. Please no pitch about the company, just your name and the company's name.
We're the only people allowed to pitch companies here tonight, right?
Okay, I'm Tony Bear with Ovum, no pitch. Anyway, I actually would have questions for everybody, but I'll just have one. And I'll address this to Todd, because I think tonight what we saw is examples of a new kind of application and an application which is a new way of attacking an old problem. So I'm thinking, for instance, like with Sailthru, and maybe this is just one of the applications you were talking about, but you're talking about customer engagement. Well, we've been doing customer engagement applications, but you have a new way of doing it. Whereas, like, basically the others are basically talking about some new types of problems that they're trying to solve. So I want to ask you, Todd, in terms of the next generation of applications on big data, are they mostly going to be doing what we've been trying to do, but do it a lot better, or are we going to be doing new things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's going to be both. I think that the way people are able to apply data now. I think both companies that we heard about in my model anyway, from my little kind of like rose-tinted spectacles, are consumer intelligence applications. Right? You're taking signals from consumers, and in many ways trying to personalize and deliver a personalized experience. And that was a big lesson for me at Yahoo. So I think that there's, we're going to be doing some things that we've already done, but just doing it better with way more data and getting way more specific and personalized about it. And then there will be a whole new class of new applications that we just couldn't do before. The industry has really changed. The BI industry has changed where, 10 years ago, look, I used to work at a company called Teradata. They called it Teradata because they thought terabyte was a lot of data back at the time. They couldn't think of there's anything going to be more than a terabyte. And I have like a couple of terabytes on my desk now in my time capsule backup machine. Right? So the scale of data that you're able to consume, and derive insight out of has dramatically changed. At Yahoo, when I left, we had 200 petabytes of data that we used to, build models and do personalization and scoring and ranking and all of that stuff. You could have never done that 10 years ago, and so that's going to enable a whole new class of apps that we haven't thought of yet. Right? We have not actually had a chance to get there because the technology and the infrastructure and the platforms was not there to be able to build those apps.
So we have this mantra around the office, which is that editors should be editors, not analysts. I think that will work in pretty much any industry, because the idea of handing out random logins to Google Analytics and believe that your organization is wiser seems naive tomorrow, perhaps slightly smart today, but that's not going to work out. I think we can all agree on that. So I think what we're going to see is really intelligent agents here. And what we would really like to do as we move forward, and I think that could be replicated to any organization, is that I want to be that smart person across the table that the editor can ask, you know what, that story on what's going on in Spain and them might not be exactly in the shape they want to be in, is that the story we're going to go with? That's a fair question. That's easy to understand. But how does he actually communicate with my intelligent agent, and how do I actually respond to him in a language that he understands? And today it might be overly simple in the platforms that we have, and we have dashboards that we're trying to kind of make easy to use, but there's certainly still dashboards or screens or mini Bloomberg terminals. Don't sue me just yet, but in that concept. But I think these intelligent agents is going to arrive in multiple ways. Or at least that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's sort of personalizing certain content based off the dashboard kind of reporting side of things. And there's a lot of dashboarding right now, a lot of that, but it's not giving it's not actionizing. It's not really making that data actionable, right? And the personalization that has happened up until this point has been very much around gender and sort of cookie pool kind of data. I think there was a recent article in the New York Times about one of the companies, I forget which it was, personalizing on gender, and it was
Groupon.
It was a
Groupon to gender and zip code. That's it.
And it's very rudimentary. I mean, it doesn't matter if you've got some male that likes to buy high heels. I mean, I'll put high heels in front of him. Why not? He's going to buy them. Maybe it's his Thursday nights. I don't know. But it's so, and I think that and it's also personalization across the whole thing. So I think it's about the intelligence. It's making sure that the experience, whatever screen you're on, whether it's tablet or iPhone or PC, whatever it is, that customization continues across the whole breadth.
Hi, I'm Gary Vidal. I work for MarkLogic, the XML database company. I guess a point to Todd, with the Hadoop being kind of the single most player in the big data space, Dean Wampler kind of put it out there and said, Hadoop is like the EJBs of, the modern era. So is it coming to the point where the new revolution in big data will actually be about simplifying the big data, like turning it into the Spring, a Spring framework, so that it's more accessible to developers, which is kind of the core of the problem that you just stated?
Yes, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think Hadoop to me served a great purpose, which was to build a platform that allowed mere mortals to do parallel programming and allowed them to scan massive data sets, which they could never do before. They had to be some sort of academic or understand really esoteric programming languages. And so Hadoop came along and said, we do two things. One, we have a file system, HDFS, which will scale forever for probably like 99.9% of the companies on the planet. They're just never going to run out of space, to put data into it. And two, MapReduce allows you to write a simple program that can scan all of that data. And boom, all of a sudden people could build like different data programs. But I really think of it as kind of like the core of a kernel of a distributed operating system. And if you look at the menagerie of things that exist in the Hadoop ecosystem, whether it's Hadoop or Hive or HBase or, all of the Pig and all the rest of the stuff that goes around it, pardon my French that nearly slipped out, right now it's still just like the homebrew computing club experience. And I actually think that, you're spot on, which is, people want more of the Visual Studio kind of like, or Apple developer experience to build these applications, and that's going to enable the next wave of novel applications, not just retreading of the existing ones, as the previous question. Right now we are retreading existing applications because people are like, well, I have more data and more signals. I can get better, in some cases, personalization. But that's super interesting, but what about all those other applications that we haven't thought of yet because, people don't have the tools, mere mortals don't have the tools to be able to go and use those platforms and access that data. And the Spring analogy is very spot on.
Hi there, Catherine Colton with QSensei Corp, and we're a multidimensional search and analytics company. So I have two questions. It might be a little bit controversial. So there seems to be a trend with personalized relevance, but the one issue about personalized relevance is that it's not real time and it's analyzing information from the past. And so how do you separate the anomalies? Like, let's say now I may be tracking Euro Cup news on Business Insider, but after next week I don't really care for football. Maybe a little bit, but I won't track it as closely as I do now. So how do you track those anomalies and so that you're not feeding me things I'm not interested in right now? Secondly, as you're tracking information on all of us, on all, let's say even Business Insider, how many millions of users visit each month, is it scalable? I imagine the challenge will be to, what is your infrastructure to be able to track and maintain all that information over time?
Joe? So answer the second question first. We use MongoDB. We use a lot of, we have our own colos because we have to deliver the emails as well, so we have an awful lot of servers as well. Is it scalable? It's scaling right now. I mean, we have to do a lot of work on it all the time, but it's that's my background. Hopefully I can still scale things. No, it's very much a case of looking at the data in real time. And we make those decisions in real time. As for the anomalies, we have anomalies. We're looking at trying to sort them out better. We take them out. We look at frequency, freshness. We look at all kinds of things, all of the data sets that we can to kind of figure out, this person bounced off this content versus they actually consumed it. We're looking at improving those all the time, and we work on them. And one of the things is because we're doing it on email, we get, we can test on site fairly quickly and radically so that we can, improve the algorithms in the email, which is much harder to sort of test because you have a test period which is much longer. But yeah.
David Crawford with AppNexus. Another question for Todd. I've noticed a lot of the big infrastructure that comes out that has become widely adopted. It's actually not created by companies that go and build infrastructure. It's built by companies that have their own infrastructure problems to solve, by Amazon, by Yahoo, by Google, by Facebook. What do you think kind of your advantages and disadvantages are against large companies that are not focused on infrastructure but build infrastructure as a course of their business and then open source it? Why is it that they have been generating a lot, or am I right that they've been generating a lot of the infrastructure today? And do you think that what makes kind of a company that's going to go focus on it either advantaged or disadvantaged in that way?
So let me tackle the first question there. I absolutely agree with you that those large companies, the web scale companies, are the companies that have been building the new infrastructure. And they've had to because it just doesn't exist. Right? Yahoo built Hadoop because they didn't have anything, and they were already on kind of like third version of the search engine, and that wasn't scaling to where the web was going. They saw this paper from Google and thought, that looks pretty cool. We'll try that. Facebook built Hive, right, because they needed a tool to sit on top of Hadoop, to allow their business analysts a kind of SQL interface to this big data platform. My graph of like the evolution of the market, those were the pioneering companies. If you go and squint, and look at kind of like Yahoo's architecture, or Google, or LinkedIn, or Netflix, or Facebook, they all look the same, but they all have different components that they built themselves internally. Right? You go to kind of like the XLDB conferences, if you went to the last one, there was pretty much this is our architecture picture from all of those companies. And if you step back, they all had those components in, but they built and open sourced their own ones. Why do I think that, open source, these companies are open sourcing them? Well, it's the classic open source mantra is, look, we can build it all ourselves, which is what Google does, by the way. Or we can open source it and get, actually more eyeballs on it and get more users of it. And so this is actually at Yahoo a very distinctive strategy that we adopted in the Global Cloud Computing Group, which is to say, we will open source all of our infrastructure because it's not a core competitive advantage to us. The applications and the secret source on top of it is the core competitive advantage to us. And that's why Hadoop was open source and Traffic Server and a whole bunch of other things. So, in a parallel to that is to look at Linux, right? Linux came out, the kernel was open source, and people built distributions around it and added the packaging and everything around it. And that's the kind of phase I think we're going through right now. I would struggle to advise someone to say, hey, build some more infrastructure, do it on your own, in your own company at the minute, right? I think that's a tough road to go down. Ultimately, the kind of scale of architecture and infrastructure that we're building just requires huge amounts of effort. But there's lots of opportunity above that, in building nicer layers or packaging or making it easier for mere mortals to consume at the minute. I'm sure that answers your second question.
Hello, I'm Joe Eisenberg with Yatamine Analytics and wear a couple other hats. My question is for Daniel. I enjoyed your presentation. He's Dr. Goodnight at SAS Institute. It was discouraged everyone from using PowerPoints. He said, if you use a PowerPoint, you have no power and no point. And what he said in North Carolina, was like holy. But in any case, question, you mentioned you're getting excellent prediction of customer actions. Why is that? Is it in your modeling, your tools, the data, the problem domain? Because I see you're investing in more people and more staff. And what explains your success as compared to in other environments where you're not so successful?
Well, I guess it's me.
What about you? I mean, your expertise in R and Python? Or
no, I think it's mostly the fact that the data is good. That's really what it is. I mean, I've built a lot of different models, predictive and statistical inference, for different types of problems, from medical to consumer to recommendation system. And the point is that I can do good statistical analysis, I can code and all of these things, but in the end, if I have good data and I have okay modeling skills, it'll always do better than great modeling skills and okay data. That's just fact. I mean, it's just simple, right? I mean, that's why, as a sort of banal example, the medical industry space has a lot of potential, because reading a medical record of someone is really great information about them, right? And that's the same thing here. So if you have records of individual actions that essentially can tell a human being what's going on, then you can use a machine to process more of those. And a machine's not going to be any smarter than you, right? You're always smarter. You can process information in a more malleable way. You just can't process as much of it. That's really the answer, other than the original response. I mean, there are tricks. I mean, there's technical aspects to it as well, but that's really, I think, where it has to go.
Hi, I'm Joel Natividad with Antodia. So we want to do big data for open data. You mentioned something, Daniel, about intelligent agents. Do you see, apart from this big data tools that you're using, using semantic technologies and all that stuff. Do you see that being useful in this space as well?
That question to me?
Yeah.
Anybody? Daniel, you mentioned intelligent agents.
Dennis.
Dennis. Yeah.
Tomato, tomato. I'm sure we can come up with multiple ways to kind of define what that intelligent agent will look like in the future, but in lack of any better way of describing, I think that's a good way of kind of putting it. I just don't see any one of us in here trying to gain an advantage in big data in a field that we just don't understand. So I probably can't really read a medical record. Could have a look at it and say, I look kind of okay. I walked up here, so I must be in decent shape. But I think I need intelligent agents to help me process that specific set of data and help me come to some sort of conclusion. I might have parameters for how I'd like it to interpret that data, but I want the agent to come up with a suggestion or even a conclusion on, should I go to the doctor or shouldn't I go to the doctor? Why don't I just, do a check, once every Monday and check that data set and there's a, indication on, today's the day, Dennis, you should go to the doctor. The next half hour, you got 29 minutes. But I need certain inputs in certain fields where that intelligent agent is going to help me out. I just can't see me kind of work, a whole bunch of data myself, trying to come up with a conclusion, which I might actually believe is the best thing to do. This whole kind of conundrum of you coming up with something which you've concluded on, you turn it into a best practice for your organization, for only to figure out half a year later that it's a worst practice. But now you educated everybody to kind of go take action on that. So I'm not sure I can come to that best conclusion or that best practice all the time. And that's what I want help with.
So I just want to comment on that. I mean, I couldn't agree more, like on the subject of intelligent agents or whatever we want to call them. So at Yahoo, just before I left, we were working on what we called the closed feedback loop system for data. But basically, the actions, and this is for our global content platform. So when you go to the Yahoo front page, as it's been talked about, the stories that you see are actually all driven by algorithms, and we personalized and did we would do 3 million different versions of that on a daily basis. And the editors, we were trying to take the editors out of the loop, so they weren't having to make the decisions, but they could influence and nudge. And so there's a bunch of algorithms that we took all of these data signals from, and if they were the one kind of the stop point where everything just stopped at them, you would then we ended up with a lot less engagement, a lot less click through and all the rest of it. Once we moved it all to algorithms and had editors just use their what humans are good at, which is this kind of just being able to do correlations that the algorithms maybe didn't. We were able to drive a 300% improvement in click-through rate just on 4 news stories in this Today module on the front page. And so that's the direction I think that big data ultimately is going to allow us to get to, is these kind of closed loop feedback loop systems where unfortunately the machines are making the decisions. Right?
You're actually right on that. So what we've, without going into full-blown advertising here, but that's exactly what we've done, where we're trying to help that editor, where sometimes he'll come to the conclusion that I'm going to go heavily put what's going on in Egypt at the very top of the page, in my hero spot. And I'm going to do that no matter how well it performs, because that's who we are and we must tell that story. If that is indeed the case, it doesn't make sense for me to come back every 5 minutes or however often I make recommendations on, that story is in tanking. We need to move that further down the page. I might even suggest we move it off the page and onto a section front page. What he needs, really for me, is just to leave him alone. So we have these kind of feedback loops where he'll go in and say, I'm going to pin that story. So if you could be so kind and just bugger off and kind of work the rest of the page, that'll be very nice. And that's exactly what we do. But we have other feedback loops where he might say, given that we try to do this editorial tone modeling, so I don't turn the FT into the New York Post or vice versa. But he might say, given the editorial instructions, I know I've allowed you to provide lifestyle stories about the folds after 4 o'clock. I just can't take it right now. Could you please, again, be so kind and just snooze this recommendation? If it still resonates with the audience later, bring it back to my attention. And that is not so much different from how you would interact with another editor saying, hey, Susan, thank you, but it's not going to play out right now. Come back later. If she comes back in 5 minutes and says, hey, that gallery, remember? Yeah, we talked 5 minutes ago. I remember. Oh, yeah. If she comes back in 10 minutes, say, that gallery, Susan, you're a fucking idiot. What are you doing here? And what we need is to kind of figure out how to emulate that environment so we can participate intelligently in that discussion. We're certainly not there, but that feedback loop, I think, is the closest we've come, at least for now, to that intelligent agent. So that the editor, when he sits and kind of have a discussion with our platform, it becomes that discussion. We really kind of present it like that. Hey, if in doubt, put the two editors here. I'll bring my monitor. I'll put it at this chair. No, that's me. And you need to kind of tell me how you want to interact with that.
Francois here. I'm designing reporting systems. Todd mentioned two big disruptions, like real time and then basically building models at the moment you will use them. My question would be for the data scientist, is it something you actually do already, or is it something you could do if you had the ability to, and how would it change what you produce?
Good. All right. So the way we've set it up at the moment is that we do not model our data at the moment we need it. Well, actually we do. We need it continuously. So we have our model being updated also in a continuous fashion. And
what does continuous mean in your case? Every
well,
5
yeah, it
minutes,
depends a
15
bit on the
minutes?
algorithm you're using. So sometimes if you want to use, not every algorithm is suitable for updating it. So, and that brings us back to recomputing, and you've mentioned this, recomputing the model every hour or every week. Depends on how fast your concepts are shifting, or how fast the distributions are changing. But sometimes you have an algorithm that is actually suitable for being updated, so that you don't have to recompute everything. You just feed it in some new data, or you tell it, forget this old data, and you can work with that. So that saves you a lot of computation time.
I can tell you the extremes. I went all James Bond on your own before we arrived here. Don't say anything. But the rivers that we're kind of working with is either on a 15-second level, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, and so on and so forth. So it all kind of depends on what we need to model on. Some things we need to do every 15 seconds. Some things it just doesn't really matter whether I do it every 15 seconds or every 5 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much everything that we deployed and worked on, at least on my end, hasn't depended on very, very fast computation. I mean, it's just the nature of the business here. It's not a high frequency shop, right? So, which gives us the flexibility to do things that way. So that's just something we don't need to think about right now.
Yeah, I mean, most of the sort of the predictive sort of disengagement stuff doesn't need to be for real time for us. The content recommendations does, and so the content recommendations are completely real time. So you read a piece of content, we're changing that on that next, that next pull, we're changing that response. So that happens immediately. But the predictive sort of disengagement stuff can run, and the behavioral model as such runs in the background, and that can be updated. But when we're updating on a real-time basis for the individual.
I mean, there's also the question of updating the model and actually generating a prediction, right? I mean, these can be separate entities. Right? So if you're interested in generating a prediction right now, well, you have some model with some coefficients, whatever it is, some function, and you pass it some vector of numbers, it spits out a number instantaneously, and you're good to go, while at the same time you're updating something or retraining something that's happening. And then maybe that retraining can take an hour or 5 minutes or whatever it might need to take, and then the coefficients just get replaced. So I mean, it's not something that is really an issue that's insurmountable to us. It's not a bottleneck.
Hi, my name's Dan Eldridge. I'm late, so I apologize if it's been asked before. In terms of open data, open business data, to the whole panel, what business data would you like to see published, or what do you, in your mind's eye, what should companies be publishing these days? And this question's been asked before. It's not my original question.
We've went in the opposite direction, which is that we tell every single one of our clients that, I'm not in the data distribution business. I'm in the prediction and recommendation business. So if I work with the sun, that data set is theirs. It's not something which I can take advantage of. That is actually an advantage of theirs, that they happen to be bigger than, say, the Sunday Times. So they should use that to their advantage. And that should be shared across my network. Actually,
to enhance that data, what data would you like to see out there that will be accretive to that?
I think when I worked at Yahoo, we had some 126 features on every person coming in. That was some sexy data. I kid you not. I would like those. I'm not going to get those for free, but if you and I together could walk up and persuade them to open source that would be wonderful. So that will tell you,
It's funny.
age, gender.
I actually tried to make that happen, but Carol didn't buy it.
I signed my contract with Jerry. He might have bought it.
My take, one thing, I was actually just chatting to someone about this over lunch, back to my point about we'll see this kind of huge novel set of applications that emerge. I would love it in this kind of altruistic world if all healthcare data, anonymized healthcare data, was made available for researchers and people to actually build applications on top of. Because just imagine the efficiencies and benefits you could get out of looking at such a large-scale data set of what diagnostic worked here, or is that treatment plan, does that get you better quickly? Imagine the benefit that we could have to society, right? If we could actually mine and build much better understanding of what works and what doesn't for different people, right? Imagine if you could personalize healthcare the same way that we're personalizing email or news stories. I think that would actually be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know that I've only got any specific request of what I'd love to see out there, but I think that it's whatever the businesses feel comfortable with. But the problem is that they make mistakes when they publish this data. I mean, what was it? Was it AOL that did
AOL.
that? AOL did that thing where they released a whole bunch of anonymized data and it wasn't anonymized. I can't remember why, but it's like, what was the?
It was anonymized, but you could correlate across it and figure out the grandmother who lived in Florida or something.
I think that all government stuff we can get out there, the better. But it's definitely the problem of mining all kinds of different sets of data. It's very difficult.
I think the one thing to add to that is that there's a lot of data out there that's available. It's just hard to get. The government, like the SEC, is really good at making all their records public, but you have to actually know how to code to pull them. So I think there's two flips to that coin, in that you can ask for more things to be available and deal with these privacy issues. You can also just ask for the things that are available to be available in a way you can use, right? In a format you can use, in a format you can understand. That's a big deal, and that's not being addressed across the board for sure.
We have time for a couple more, and then we're all going to go out and drink.
Yes. McCool from Slalom Consulting, the technology division. I had a question for Todd. I found it very interesting that you thought that in the current business, in the current model, for big data reporting tools, big data visual analytics, you didn't think they were up to speed or up to a point where they were useful. What do you think are the current limitations of?
That's not exactly what I said. I don't think.
You're saying that in the sense that they haven't yet come up to where they're open to the market, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think are the limitations of the current set of maybe BI reporting tools or the newer generation of data discovery tools, and where do you think they can improve to help report or help use big data in a more analytical way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, ultimately, if you kind of try to eliminate the data scientist as it stands today, like a programmer who's really good with mathematical models and probably had a PhD in physics or something, to the point where my mother could actually browse data, right? There's a couple of tools out there doing pretty well. Tableau's one that I really like, right? I mean, it's this grassroots tool that comes in and spreads like a weed and wildfire through big organizations. And, the CIO is like, oh, we've got a site license for MicroStrategy. And the users are like, no thanks. Yeah, I've got my Tableau thing here and it works nicely, right? But, and they've done a decent job actually of porting it to a point of kind of like the big data places. But I think there's a tremendous amount more that people can do, right? I mean, how many of you have seen like Minority Report and the whole, sliding things around and drill into that data and out and all the rest of it? The fact that we can actually dream that and visualize it, it means that, where we are today and what we can think about, there's a big gap, right? And there's a big gap all up and down the stack. Yes, we could do the user interface, and, Perceptive Pixel and people like that are building, you see them in the kind of like the general elections and things like that, where the news, people on the wall and sliding things around and all the rest of it. But that's kind of like Windows 1.0 version of like, where we can actually be with these user interfaces. But even if someone came up with a user interface that can do all of that, what are they going to connect it to? Like there's still a massive gap between, that, fancy kind of like Hollywood-esque stuff and actually what they can do with the data. And that's where, we as an industry have to do a lot more. It's a lot further than just, the old traditional RDBMS world of, we've got some schema and we understand the relations and you can query and navigate in and out and drill up and down through these cubes. Forget that. Cubes are basically like answers to questions you already knew. What you're actually trying to do with, I think, and this is where the big change that I was talking about earlier, they go from, schema at write time to schema at read time is, you actually want to navigate through and get insight out of data that you didn't know the questions to before. That's why you're doing it, right? That's what data science is about at the minute. And I think it's going to take us, like I said, 5 to 7 years until we get to the point where you don't have to be a programmer who understands Python or R or, pick your favorite, language. To actually go and get that insight. That's going to be where, we actually get to the point where data actually is truly useful, right? At the minute it's pretty useful.
Is it working? Yeah. Nicholas Vandenberg from Tengen MongoDB. I have a question for Sailthru and digital revenue. Given that you use your client's data, I would imagine that it can sometimes be hard to get that data, either because they haven't stored it or they put it in different places. And then it's probably also difficult to explain to the user what they're going to do with it, like you were telling, you get some pushback. So is your engagement model pretty high touch, like you actually, it's more like a consulting assignment where you get into a long-term relationship? Or have you been able to standardize your interface so that it's like Google Analytics, you can just come plug and play and go on? And what kind of obstacles are you finding in the real world?
I mean, we're fairly similar to sort of Google Analytics kind of installation kind of thing. I mean, it's not a huge dev project to integrate, but we are long-term relationship kind of stuff. So we see every page view of every one of our customers, and that is what we index. And then we also spider the hell out of those sites as well.
So we're not Google Analytics because obviously I don't believe in the concept of just handing out tons of data back to my customers. They just sent me the data. If I send it back with an invoice of 10K, I'm not sure they're super happy about that. So we try to be high touch in the sense that we don't think we can be successful without being high touch. So it would be, again, naive to believe that the set of recommendations that I provide for the Telegraph would be the same as those that I provide for Forbes. So we need to have that set of discovery calls with the editors on what is it that you expect me to provide you back in return now that you sent me all the data and you keep sending that back to me. I think what's been the biggest obstacle for us is that back in the mid-90s, when we got started on kind of traditional analytics, was the idea that you can collect all the data in the world, and nobody really knew that you were collecting all the data. But everybody today is certainly much more aware of the fact that we have data. I'm a publisher, and that data is mine. So if I hand that over to you, we need to have some sort of agreement on what you do with that data. And not even do we need to have an agreement on that, me sending it to you has become somewhat of an obstacle. That is not just, hey, we have a chat on Monday, I get the data on Tuesday. That is going to be queued up as that 41st or 41st pixel on Bloomberg.com. And I need to kind of get that. And that takes time and effort, and it's certainly a lot harder today just from an enterprise sales point of view. Well,
great. Hello. Hi. It's 8 o'clock. Time to drink. Thank you so much to our presenters.